Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to introduce again Professor,
Okay.
Professor Adolf Sotoca from UPC BarcelonaTECH University, who's our visiting professor for 12 years. Some of you already know him for many years. Some of you just met him this week. And some of you just met him today. So Professor Sotoca, except of being our visiting professor, has been also a visiting professor to numerous universities worldwide, in the United States, in Asia, in all over Europe, in Zurich, in Venice, Brussels, Rotterdam, whatever you name, they know you, Frankfurt. And he's also an urban planner and architect, running his own office, CS
Architectors.
For many, many years. And I think everything you will hear from him would enrich your knowledge and would help you to understand how modern cities should work, should be designed. So, Adolf, thank you very much for coming again, and floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mateus, for having me again here in this very well-beloved city. And yes, as usual, when one gets the commission to prepare a lecture, something terrifying takes a grip, because the big thing is how to start. So I was asked to deliver this lecture today about ecological planning, what I prefer to name under the motto of current ecologies, because I think ecology should be something more accessible for people to understand. Ecology is not only about greenery or working in biological terms. Ecology is surrounding us every day in our daily lives. So I like this term of current ecologies that refers, as you will see, to two terms or two concepts at the same time. Those things that are current in our lives, and also the ecology that goes along the streams of life, right? So when discussing or when thinking about how to initiate this lecture, I didn't know how to do that, so I took the usual strategy, which I take typically, which is running in the mornings, right? And hopefully get some inspiration. So this is my daily running route here in Krakow. It's along Rudawa. Maybe you know about that. So I don't know, this is the pointer. Yeah, this is the Vistula River. So the Rudawa Canal goes almost to the airport. So going along this route, yesterday morning, I came across this image, right? Which is a kind of ordinary image of this landscape, which is green. It seems to be ecological, very much related with nature, particularly with this water stream. So it feels good. But if you look carefully, or a little bit more careful, you identify some things that are not as natural or as ecological as one might think. You see all of a sudden, or if you look carefully, you come across some concrete structures, you come across some buildings that are being built nowadays in the area with some so-called ecological devices or gadgets, and behind the trees, the paradigm of ecology, you see some yellow elements, some yellow colors. And if you look at these things more carefully, you realize that urban ecology, when it comes to ecology in cities, is not only about greenery, it's about the different relationships and the set of complex system relations that are established among humans and non-humans, materials, immaterial things also, cultural dimensions of the way we inhabit cities, and metabolic flows. metabolic flows of matter, of water, of energy. This set of very complex relationships is what defines ecology per se. And if we look more in detail to these elements, you may guess that we are talking about sewage system, throwing the water to the river canal directly, after some purification processes, hopefully. But also we see buildings being built at the moment with some ecological gadgets, solar panels, and that green color behind the trees is no more, no less than a building crane, helping out with the construction of new dwellings made of concrete, which is the most unecological material. This is the most polluting and most carbon dioxide emission industry we have in the world, even more polluting than aviation, for instance, right? And this all happens in this very, let's call, idyllical landscape. To me, coming from a very dense city from Southern Europe, this still looks to me like a very pleasant, very natural landscape. But my point here is that by looking sharply, by having a more, intentional look at things, we may discover the complexity of ecologies happening all around us. The driving thread of this ecological thinking for many years now has been water. Water being the most basic element present in any single ecological process, right? So it's nothing discovered recently. Very early in time, Élisée Reclus, who is regarded one of the ecological proto-fathers, right, wrote this book, late 19th century, which is called the story of a stream, right, of a water stream. Later on, 70 years after, Ayag Mahart, one of the founding fathers of this geographical information systems, wrote this book, Design with Nature, which is very much about planning ecologically, right? Planning with nature, according to the rationales and the logics of nature. And more recently, Matthew Gandhi published this wonderful book as well, which is The Fabric of Urban Space, Water, Modernity, and the Urban Imagination, right? So almost for more than 150 years, we have understood ecology or the water vector as one way to understand the ecological processes in the city. So going to that idea and using water as a rationale to disclose the ecological patterns, I decided some years ago to follow this track and to analyze urban ecology in Barcelona by focusing on one of its rivers. There are two main rivers in Barcelona. One of them is the Besòs River. For some years now, I've been working on that, but with this ecological approach, this has been more recent. So you have here two images of the same river, late 50s, and you see how it looks like today, quite urban. It has been regenerated, so today it may look like a very successful public space, but still it has been the stage or the scenario for many, frictions between environmental assets and the new urbanization coming into the river. So going in more detail, we may see that this is the city of Barcelona. You may be familiar with it. Just to give you a little bit of context, this is the old city center. This is the so famous, so explained, broadly discussed Eixample Cerdà. And you see here the Besòs River, the one that I was showing you previously on the screen, right? Some people, or some coming from different contexts, may not even call this a river. It's much more of a water stream surrounded by plenty of dense neighborhoods, industrial estates, plenty of infrastructures, metabolic services, infrastructures, water depuration, waste management plants, and so on and so forth. So it's not we commonly understand as nature. But if we go back in time, not so long ago, we will discover that early 50s, this was a quite natural area. The river was not regulated. There were plenty of agricultural crops around it. So actually Barcelona at some point, mid-20th century, was self-sustainable from the food production standpoint, and much of the food was produced here. So it was not natural. It is an anthropic landscape, of course, it's farming, but still there was not this pressure of the city, of the dense fabric reaching so close to the river. The river was even wild. It was not regulated at that time. But at some point, due to some socio-demographic and socio-political processes, the city council decided to urbanize this particular area. There was a immense migration flow coming to the city of Barcelona, looking for new opportunities, seeking for jobs. So this area, which was available, and by the way, was foresaw by Delphonse Sardà, the one who planned the Eixample Sardà, as a big metropolitan park, as a kind of nature reservoir area, it was fully urbanized. And that was the beginning of a very interesting socio-political process, which is the distribution of different population strata across the city. It was decided that this part of the city was going to be the area where not so wealthy working class population could live, could be located, right? And in time, after many years, this is the image of what we find nowadays in Barcelona. What you see on the screen is a mapping of the income per household. As you can guess, green areas are wealthy areas, right? And red areas are not so wealthy areas, right? So you see the socio-spatial segregation of the city, which has very much to do with these socio-environmental issues. So, being struck by this image, we decided a couple of years ago to work in this particular area, right? Together with my fellows at the school, at the architecture school in Barcelona, and with our students. And we have been working on that area for the last couple of years, and very recently we came up with this book, which is Barcelona Besòs, that's the name of the river, and the subtitle of that is Current Ecologies, Urban Regeneration for the City of Barcelona. This is a book of books. Later on you will see. Because we didn't imagine this exploratory work as a kind of addition, compilation, linear aggregation of information, but much more as a kind of hypertext, working with several and different materials. So what I'm going to show you today is a little bit the content of the outcomes of that research, which is structured in these 5 different chapters, and you will see how they are organized. First, it was important for us to define the concepts that we were concerned with, right? This is what we call the glossary. And it has to do with the definition of the terms, how we get to know them, that's episteme, how we apply them, technology, techne, but most importantly, the ethical condition of this glossary. What is behind that? The question is not what we do, but what we do for. What is the reason for us to act? When it comes to ecology, these kind of questions, who gets benefited from our action, is absolutely critical. And this is what the classics, Aristotle, called under the term of phronesis. Then maps, we started acknowledging or describing this large territory in order to identify critical transects, itineraries, right? Areas with different characteristics, that is what we call quadrants, and then nodes or clusters where our attention should be deeply focused. So it's lines, surfaces, and points, to put it in geometrical terms. Then we went for the case study. Once we have identified this particular territory, it is super important for us to contextualize our knowledge. Knowledge is not generic. It needs to be context-based. It needs to be local, because we don't believe in generic recipes. We believe in proper, specific responses to particular situations, right? Under the leading view of a practical reason, which is not instrumental reason. It's a different thing. Instrumental reason is how to do things. Practical reasons is why we do things. What for do we do things, right? And then the idea of assemblages. This is it's a kind of trending topic today in research, which is considering the complexity of the case studies, not only working from the physical or the spatial dimension, but paying a lot of attention to the social dimension of things, right? Then we engage in co-design. It's not something that we do from our desk at the university. We go there, we set feet on the ground, we get in close contact with communities, and we cooperate with them. And actually, this methodology has found a kind of continuity together with the Politechnika, the School of Architecture at Politechnika Krakowska, and I will develop a little bit later on that, right? So action research is our methodology. We work in urban commons or environmental commons, and we see these ecological assets as a kind of heritage that we need to rely on for any kind of future interventions. And finally, I will show you some proposals done together with our students at the Masters of Sustainable Intervention on the Built Environment, which is the master's that I'm directing or leading there in Barcelona, that these proposals, they have three basic principles. They are possible proposals. That doesn't mean real proposals. That means that they are possible. If we attend to the principle of reality, there are many constraints today that if we believe in them, make things that should be possible or would be possible impossible, right? So it's going beyond the reality and thinking in terms of possibility. I will develop a little bit later on. Things that they need to be suitable, right? They need to be according to the conditions of the site, and for that we develop a thorough analysis of the existing conditions, and of course they need to be sustainable, not only from the environmental standpoint, but mostly from the social standpoint. We don't see society and environment as different dimensions. We see them very much embedded. As I mentioned, our book, or this book of books, is not a linear reading. These chapters are organized in 4 different books or sub-books, so the reader can play with them and go from one to another, right, in order to jump from concept to concept and to make a cross-reading between the glossary, the proposals, the so-called discourses, and the mapping. The idea is that each reader may be able to come up with her or his own conclusions, building her or his own narratives. I will go now through the different issues or through the different chapters. The glossary. The glossary is a collegiate endeavor. This is something that we all professors teaching at this particular master program, we did it together, right? We set a number of interviews. All of us, we were talking about our particular obsessions, right? And at the end of all this process, we transcribed all these interviews, and we came up with a number of critical concepts for us. And they are defined and included in our book. And these are the most important one of them. Actually, they are all of them here, right? And they are ordered according to the importance that we give to them all together. It's a kind of polyphonic definition of terms. They are all there defined by all of us, right? So I would highlight some of them. Of course, the urban ecology question is an urban one. It's not something that we can deal from the object standpoint. We deal with that from a wider perspective, a wider scope. So that means being or going for urban. We pay a lot of attention about resources on demand, this equilibrium or this balance between the availabilities of a certain territory, which are the resources, and the social demands. And everything when it comes to sustainability is about the balance between these both tensions or these both components, right? Obsolescence is a very important word for us also to acknowledge or to recognize why material realities become obsolete, not because they become obsolete from their material standpoint, but also from their functional standpoint, from their symbolic standpoint, from the social standpoint in general, right? So, and adaptability also, it's a concept that we pay a lot of attention. So I won't develop longer in this. You will have the book, and you always have the opportunity to go to the interviews that are registered and posted online in this website. UPC provides a Thona video, upc.edu, and there, if you search for glossary on sustainability, you will find this video of around 30 minutes, I think, 25 minutes, that you will see from first voice the definition of these terms by the staff working in this research project. Okay, maps. This is important. Once we identify this corridor, this Bessos River area, we started to analyze that by using geographic information systems, right? And we start with acknowledging or recognizing or analyzing what was there before the urbanization process began, right? This is a map of 1945, if I'm not mistaken. No, 1956. And besides the land use, this is not showing land use, this is just showing the imperviosity of the land, how impermeable the land was. Because, as I said, water cycle is absolutely critical for us. So being aware of the need of the rainwater to drain down to the soil and replenish the aquifer is absolutely, it's a matter of death of our life in Barcelona, right? So before urbanization, actually, I forgot to mention, this is a delta area. Much of the drinking water in Barcelona used to come from here, right? Not today, because the aquifer has been dried up for the processes that I will tell you about, but it was in the past. And this aquifer was replenished because the soil, the topsoil was permeable, right? But in the span of only 4 years, this happened in the city of Barcelona. This development, these are the plans, the original plans for the area. As you can see, the idea was to seal everything, right? And to extend the city until the very border or the very boundary defined by the river, right? And this is how the city looks like today in terms of permeability. So this is a great, an incredible disruption of the ecological cycles, right, as you can imagine. So we started by acknowledging that there are data that I won't show you, but it's available in the book. And this is what we call the climate intensity maps. These are different components that have been built in the last 50 years. So the darker the very latest, the more have been improved and got over data to showing that this end of the river is in an object of discussion, the political pressures all over the time, showing whereas the all there is for activity. Like some other areas, such as villages are being installed for tested atmosphere all over the country. Then in this, the climate change, what are we thinking this? It's for like that. This is crossing data regarding the exposure of a space towards climate change, the sensitivity of the population living there, and the capacity for adaptation. These are the 3 factors that are considered when it comes to climate change vulnerability. Being exposure, the physical conditions of the space, how impermeable an area is, for instance, how many trees there are, or this kind of, physical factors. Sensitivity has to do with socio-demographic factors, age of the population, socioeconomic level, education, and so on and so forth. And the adaptability is the capacity of a certain area to adapt to the coming challenges, right? So again, this part is quite dark in color. The darker, the worst, right? Income per household, this is what you see here in this map, and NDVI, the normalized vegetation index for that area. So it all pointed towards this very end of the river. So we started focusing on narrowing down to that particular area. And we developed some other maps, right? Which is these maps that you are seeing here at a closer scale. So again, NDVI, land surface temperature, Gini index, which is assessing the inequality within a certain area, and again, income per household, right? So after this process, it came quite apparent or explicit for us that this area was suitable for our studies, right? It's combining socio-demographic vulnerability with environmental vulnerability, right? So we were ready to identify our case study, right? That you will see in a closer look here. This is the development of the area all over the years. So you see that we are moving from a 100% agricultural area to a fully, highly density urbanized area. In the span, this happened, the sudden urbanization of this area happened in the span of only 5 years, right? And because of the living conditions there were, the environmental conditions were not that good. This is a delta area, so the soil is not stable for construction, right? It's quite unstable. So the buildings today, they are going through an acute pathology process, degradation, physical degradation. They are not stable because they are built on land that shouldn't have been built, never, okay? So still, in this, we identified 2 neighborhoods. One is El Besos. This is what you're seeing on the screen, around 100 buildings, 5,000 dwellings, and 25,000 residents here, registered residents. We are not counting here people living off the system without being registered, which in Barcelona, as you can imagine, that number is high. We don't even know how many people are living in this particular area. And next to it, we have La Pau, half of the size, to make it simple, right? 12,000 something residents, 2,500 dwellings, 60 buildings, 17 hectares. So we are working in these particular areas. These were areas, as I showed you, that were very rapidly urbanized during the late 50s, early 60s, as a way to remediate or to find a solution for the informal slums that were popping up all over the city of Barcelona as a result of this massive migration flow arriving to the city. So the first newcomers to the city, they didn't have proper living conditions, right? They were living in barracks, in slums. So the Francoist regime at that time, they undertook this public housing policy, which was building these housing estates, which, as you can see, they could even be defined as piling up vertically these slums because the very basic conditions were not even provided. The streets were not urbanized. In the early years, there were no public facilities, not to mention public spaces, but still conditions were a little bit better than in the previous informal slums, right? So from the physical standpoint, we have described these case studies from the physical and historical standpoint, but most importantly, we have been, as I said, in close contact with the different agents, local agents here in the working or living in these particular areas, from politicians, right, authorities, to technicians, officials working at the city council, grassroots movements like a community kitchen, which is delivering 300 meals per day in this particular area in El Besos, right, to people who cannot afford having a decent meal every day, and some youth movements, and well, we had up to 17 different local agents. We met with all of them, we interviewed them, and we registered the interviews, and they are published also in the same website that I showed you previously. And you can listen to those interviews. They are subtitled in English if you feel like doing that. And from the physical standpoint, it's not only the housing stock, but also the capacities and the conditions of public space. Basically, a space in between buildings. We are in a very particular urban morphology in which 80% of land is free from buildings, right? The footprint of buildings, it means only 20%, which is quite different to traditional cities, where the proportion is quite the opposite. In traditional very dense cities, and the city center of Barcelona, for instance, 20% of the space is public space, streets, basically, and 80% is just building footprint. So here is the other way around, right? So that's why attention to public space, to space in between buildings, is critical for many reasons, for the quantity, but also for the potentiality. When it comes to urban farming, right? When it comes to this process or this hydrological or water cycle, right? It's super important to intervene in those in-between building spaces. And also an exploration or a description of the housing stock. This is something I forgot to mention. Our master's program is not an urban planning program, it's a transversal program. Professors working from different disciplines, right, from different departments, we cooperate together in order to give our students a kind of transscalar and holistic understanding of these ecological issues. So yeah, for the neighborhood of La Pau, the typological diversity is quite rich, it's quite interesting, which is a kind of asset when it comes to flexibility and adaptability to new needs. Okay, having said that, we have identified the case study, and then it comes the discourses. There are 7 working lines for us, seven research tracks that we are following, and they are called discourses. I will go through them very quickly. I will just name them. The first one is the so-called social metabolism, which is a discipline in itself. It's a scientific field that aims at describing the ecological processes by measuring, assessing the flows, the quantity of flows on a certain society, meaning water flows, carbon dioxide emissions, material flows, and assessing and try to describe the socioeconomic model in that particular area through the assessment of the different flows taking place there. So this is a course or a discourse. Then city and water, understanding water as an indicator, as a very good way to disclose the conditions and the aptitudes or the suitabilities of a certain territory. City and energy, which is very much focused in describing the different models we have in using the territory through the assessment or the description of the energy systems, that it's called energy cultures. And the key point here is the usage, yes or no, of fossil fuels, right? So we are not for that, as you can imagine, but we are also a little bit critical about the extensive use of solar energy. We can talk about that later on. City and society, which is this engagement with local communities, right? And then refurbish, paying attention to the material conditions of the buildings, right? We can get a lot of information by just looking at the facades of the building and analyzing what is the material condition, but what gadgets or how many changes the facade has been suffering a long time, because users typically they express their needs on the facade of buildings, right? AC, air conditioning, popping up in facades, for instance, is a very clear indicator of a non-satisfied need, right? So we have information. The clothing hanging on balconies, for instance, is showing up also a need that is not provided for within the domestic space, and so on and so forth. Re-inhabit is very much about, the functional program of the buildings, especially residential buildings, and how from a very, nuclear family-based architectural typologies, a dwelling of 80 square meters with 3 bedrooms, addressed for a monoprofile, may or may not give a proper response to the current needs of the society, right? So Reinhabit is very much about, reflecting and discussing on the functional programs of cities. And finally, Regenerate is about understanding the wide scale, right, of the city and how environmental systems or environmental commons can work well or not at the light of the many challenges that we have ahead, right? So we define these courses. These are the lines our students are working on during a whole academic year. And then we start also to engage with communities. And we do that by going out, being active part of the many social events in these different neighborhoods, either fairs or markets or festivities in the neighborhoods. Here is one of our professors with some students, being part of cultural activities, the Migration Museum in Barcelona. We are cooperating with them quite often and organizing walking tours for those who are interested, and we are delivering some of these tours. Also working with local schools, students, secondary school students. So we go there, we learn a lot from them, and we make them participate also in our program. We think that when it comes to these kind of issues, it's important to plant the seed before students come to the university. That's why we outreach this secondary school system, and we are also part of their activities with some cooperation. And of course, the quite normal or quite well-established methodology today, which is reaching out and getting to know the local agents, local associations, migrants, officials, different entities that we engage in our discussions, and we learned a lot from them. As I said, all this process has been recorded. You may find the different interviews there. They were recorded, and in Zona Video UPC, there is plenty of very interesting information. It's not a punctual contact that we establish with them. They are together with us all along the process, and they will continue, right? We believe in endurance, in being there, presence, a long time. So we have been more than 3 years now in close contact with the different associations. Some of the outcomes of this process, SWOT analysis, right? And maybe you're familiar with the term. I've been seeing that during the week, that you are quite familiar with that. So opportunities and threats in the horizontal line, strengths and weaknesses. And these are the different colors refer to different topics, right? Different categories, housing, public space, health, etc. And the size of the dot refers to the number of how many times residents have mentioned this particular issue. And we placed these issues or these topics in this diagram in order to identify where we may find the weakest and strongest points of this particular neighborhood. And then we translate that into space. We territorialize those topics, following the same color chart. We describe especially this very abstract diagram that we have here, okay? And one of the final outputs of this work, it's a magazine that is not intended to be a scientific magazine, even though it has its number and it's registered and so on. But the idea is to spread knowledge and to disseminate our knowledge across the local residents. So the language used here is quite popular science language, right? And we distribute this magazine through the different communities that we have been working with, right? We are at the moment preparing more of these magazines regarding or related to other neighborhoods that we together with Politechniki Krakowskiej are working on. The proposals. This may be the part that you're more interested in, okay? So I prepared 3 proposals, right? 3 projects. Of course, I cannot explain them extensively, but I will try to go to the main points. Our master program is quite an horizontal one, right? It's for sure us professors delivering, or more than delivering knowledge, trying to coordinate the way knowledge is delivered or shared. It's an international program, so students from all over the world are coming. In this particular venture that we have, the last 2 years, we have had students from more than 25 nationalities, okay? So as you can imagine, coordinating that, different cultural backgrounds, different mother tongues, etc., it's a challenge. But I think that I can fairly say that we have succeeded, and at the end, our students, they keep friends for life, in a way. So, first proposal that I wanted to show you, Obras, a new model of sustainable community construction, Besso's Organization for Ecosocial Regeneration, right? So this, to start with, first, and this has to do with the idea of suitability and feasibility, right? We make numbers, a lot of numbers, a lot of calculations, so that our proposals are taken seriously by the officials, by the public authorities, right? So first is to identify or this group particularly, they identified areas of intervention and different interventions here. They built a narrative. It is very important in order to communicate these very complex issues to build an understandable narrative for both officials, authorities, residents, etc., because otherwise we at the universities may fall in the trap of speaking only among ourselves, right? Speaking only for the academic community. So we constantly make an effort to make these things understandable and very information that anyone can reach or can understand, right? So these are the interventions, what you see here. I cannot go deep into them, but the important thing is that they are assessed. In this case, they were put into relation with an existing initiative, the Pla de Barris, the neighborhood plan for the city of Barcelona, and they are assessed economically. As I said, plenty of calculations. This is the final summary sheet of the whole calculation, but there is a whole super complex Excel behind that. So the required investment is assessed there. Okay, so the image is a little bit burned here, so it's too bad, but this is an axonometry describing the several interventions, the several actions proposed for this neighborhood. From reprogramming some abandoned public buildings, the intensive work at the ground floor level. We see the ground floor level as a critical space for intervention, the relationship between the building, meaning the private domain, and the ground or the public space, meaning the public domain, right? So, and there were some technical issues regarding differences of level, activities allowed or not allowed. Our students, they also read the urban regulations, what is allowed, what is not, what should be done, or what should be changed, of course. And well, as I said, I'm so sorry that this image is not showing the detail, but maybe later on we can see it more clearly. Some before and after. This is really important to show the improvement or to show the difference between before intervention, how these spaces look like, and how students, they imagine them after that. And this program, this functional program for this abandoned public building is based on that co-design, that dialogue with local agents that they were posing their needs or what they miss in the neighborhood. So, and assessing whether that's possible from the architectural standpoint or not, students, they design and they propose some interventions. Hopefully the next image is going to be, it's a little bit more clear. So, working with time, programming. This is the existing situation as it looks today. This is the proposal that the City Council intends to develop, just improving the insulation, the thermal insulation performance of the facade by adding some extra layer of insulation and putting on top of the rooftop some solar panels. We think that that's not enough, right? That's a technological fix. but that doesn't mean social engagement. We believe, strongly believe, that communities, they need to be engaged with their actions, right? And if they are just provided with solar panels and with some, solution for the facades, and they are not part of the process, at the end, this investment will be lost because no one is going to take care of that, right? So this is our proposal. I mean, some of the improvements by the City Council, proposed by the City Council, of course, are considered, like the improvement of the vertical accessibility, new elevators, etc. But a reconfiguration of how the rooftop may look like, rather than just planting solar panels here, maybe some common activities. This has very much to do with the redefinition of the functional program, for instance, as a radical proposal. And this might sound a little bit crazy, but some of the students are very much for. They believe in community kitchens. Not everyone cooking at their homes, but sharing some spaces for communal activities like cooking, like doing the laundry, like taking care of the children in the building. So these kind of activities, they may happen on the rooftop of the building. So this is what is shown here. Or the appropriation of the ground floors, which some of them at the moment they are abandoned already, right? This is a neighborhood with where some apartments are empty. 20% of them are empty. So the work here is to manage how these empty apartments can be moved around and placed on the ground floor level so that communities can make a better optimal use of them. So this is one of the proposals. Another one is called Ripple Unit, which starts by identifying the pattern, the geometrical pattern, the stamp that is repeated. So again, it's finding the case study, that paradigmatic unit that by being improved may improve the whole neighborhood. So it's pilot project, right? Identifying the generic solution and start working with some criteria for the reurbanization of the in-between spaces, right? Assessing what is the relationship between permeable and impermeable in the standing situation, in the current situation. The proportion is 1 to 15. So after some treatment and the usage of some materials, the proportion may be changed so that the water cycle can be completed, right? From the architectural standpoint, you may be familiar with Lacaton and Basal interventions in Bordeaux, for instance, that intervention that works with the existing typologies and expanding the space by building, instead of just adding a thermal insulation improvement or technological fix on the facade, the idea is to enlarge the space and build a galleria as a buffer zone. We used to say that rather than, instead of working with planes, we need to work with deep devices, right? With transition zones, right? And the reconfiguration also of the different typologies, right? So in this particular case, the typologies were not crossing, right? They were facing just one facade. Which because in terms of cross ventilation is not working well. And cross ventilation is a basic condition for sustainability in buildings, right, in residential buildings. So based on that and studying the structural system of the building, the students here proposed the extension of the building with these gallerias and then the reconfiguration of the functional program, going through typologies, for crossing typologies. This exploration is what you see here, the different combinations, as you can see, from the urban scale layer to the more detailed scale, right? So different typologies, diversifying the different solutions, because society today is much more complex than it was some years ago, 50 years ago or 60, when this neighborhood was built. Right, and again, sorry for the image, but the description of the technical solutions on this galleria placed in this building, and some technical studies showing the performance regarding different situations of the apartments, right? It's not the same an apartment located on the immediately below the rooftop with more exposure to the environment, right? With more surface of exchange between indoor and outdoors than a in the middle height situation of the building, or dwellings located at the ground floor level. So these are different conditions, and yeah, this is the current state, the rotation, and the proposal, right? So these are different solutions and how they behave in terms of energy saving. And this is not my field of expertise, but there is a software calculating that. I don't quite remember now the name of that particular software. Sorry for that. And then again, well, an overall image of the whole intervention where you can see the final configuration of this building and some solutions, sustainable urban drainage systems that are proposed for the surroundings of the building. Last proposal, La Pau, the other neighborhood, autopoietica, hydrological or hydric communities, right? So these are the three scales that this project, maybe, I don't know if I will be able to lower the brightness of the, well. Sorry? Okay. Yeah, well, anyway, I'm so sorry because these drawings, they are really good. But anyway, you can guess that there is the territorial scale, the district unit or neighborhood scale, and the domestic one. Let's have a look to them. So as for the urban scale, to start with, students analyzed the hydrological structure of the site. This is the Bessos River, right? And there were, in the past, many water streams going down from the mountains, the Serralada Coicerola, to the sea. And they have left their tracings on the urban fabric. The city has been shaped by these previously existing water streams. Today they are not running on surface, but the city has been growing along them, so we can follow their form all along the urban fabric, right? So today, as I said, these water streams, they have been piped and they have been put down underground, right? And there are collectors all along these former water streams. And there are some deposits along these former water streams, right? So this is how the sewage system or part of the sewage system works today, still following the same rationale or the same tracing or geometry that the water was following in the past. So based on that and using those deposits as an asset for what they call hydric communities, right? They identified areas for potential intervention, being La Pau one of them, right? So first thing is, again, to identify the ideal case study. So here what you see, it's a kind of axonometric, showing how the rainwater is collected on the rooftop, in the rooftop of the different buildings, and this water is driven to some public space area where an impluvium, if you are familiar with the term, the Roman term impluvium, this collector of rainwater creates a new public space where water is celebrated and the community is built around. Yes, so this is the whole neighborhood of La Pau. This is La Pau in relation with the wider territory, and within La Pau there is an area again that they used as a kind of pilot area, right? So the detection of towers and pressure deposits, right? Those areas that store rainwater, and they are intending to use them as a basic infrastructure for these hydric communities. And then the micro basins, by micro topography and using LiDAR as a source of information for, using geographic information system and the LiDAR, which is a kind of laser recognition of the surface of the Earth, we can obtain very precise microtopology, right, of a particular site, therefore defining the sub-basins of rainwater collection, right? And, well, they proposed this model for this community, which is not only about collecting rainwater, but also recycling gray water, right? And putting it back into the water cycle of the whole area and reducing consumption. We will see how they manage that. A section showing the existing buildings and this impluvium that I was talking about. It's not just an hydrological infrastructure, it's a socio-hydrological infrastructure. Many activities happening around it. Maybe some of you are familiar with rural areas where still or until very recently social life happened around water. In Spain we have fountains in every rural village. We call them pilones. Maybe those of you coming from Spain are still familiar with the term, right? And everything happened around that because there was not drinking water in the households, right? So people, they organized around this common good. That's a common. That's a resource that it's managed and taken care by the community, right? And this is very important. This is what I refer when I talk about community feeling, right? So the last scale or the last chapter of this exploration is a kind of, to start with, if I may say, a kind of socio-political criticism of how we have organized our life, depending or being so dependent on utilities, right? On this, you know, high standard given for granted infrastructures that each of us owns and make use of at home, right? So what will happen if we keep up or we continue with this, this level of consumption? Their statement is that at the end we may explode, right? And everything will be run down in some way. Sorry for the image again. So this is the existing situation where the humid zones are located in an existing building of La Pau, a kind of in-between solution. This was proposed by Engineers for Sustainability. It's an association in Barcelona. So they propose to centralize some of these activities, so these humid activities. So that makes or allows for a more optimal use of this resource, water. And this is the proposal by our students. So what they did is to assess for each humid room what is the consumption today, right? Where the water comes from and how the water is disposed, right? The water comes from drinking water network or infrastructure, and not all the water that we are using at home needs to be drinking quality, right? So by being aware of that and by recycling gray water into the system, we may save a lot of drinking water, which, by the way, it's very energy consuming, right? To purify and to make water drinkable, at least in Barcelona, it's super expensive from the economic, but also from the environmental standpoint. And as we are going through drought lately, they are building new desalination plants in the whole coast of Catalonia. And the cost of that, environmentally speaking, is super, super high, right? So they analyze that, and well, this is the existing situation. This is the situation according to the second proposal, right? Some of the water is coming from the drinking water network, but some other may be recycled or coming from the phreatic, from the aquifer, right? So that means a lot of saving. And then the disposed water, some of it goes directly to the sewage system, but part of it goes to the recycling system within that hydrological or hydric community. And this is the proposal Sorry for the drawings again, my apologies. And this is the final proposal on how much water is saved. The idea is to keep this resource as local as possible. So this is how they see the interior of their proposal, right? It may look to you a little bit, I don't know what word to use, but I can tell you that not this, of course, but something like this, I have it at home, right? And it's working well. I mean, I'm saving. I can give my example, no? As an example, right? Because I have the data and I can give this as a fact that this is saving a lot of water at home, at my home, right? So it may look a little bit utopian, but when it comes to a scarcity, and definitely, I don't want to sound apologetic, but definitely we are going towards a scarcity. We'll see. This kind of new thinking may be, I don't know if needed, but at least appropriate. And this is how their building may look like. Again, some exotic devices if you want, but if you think in terms of how much energy is needed to keep a minimum pressure for consumption inside dwellings, because the water is pumped, right? That means a lot of energy to keep up with the system, right? If we could be able to take up water and store that at the upper levels by using a non-fossil energy, but an energy that is distributed a long time, like wind energy, like it has been done for millenniums in our societies, we could save a lot of energy. And more importantly, we will be safer in general. There is this blackout that happened in the city of New York, 2007, I think it was. For 2 days, electricity was not running in the city, 2 days, right? Of course, there were some issues, but as for the water system, the water was still running in homes. Why is that? Because water is stored, and you have these images of deposits on top of rooftops. And by gravity, something as simple as gravity, the water was still going out of the tops, right? Because they didn't rely on pumping systems that they require electricity to function. So for me, this is a very good example how we can be more resilient at the light of coming disruptions that they may happen more and more as we are walking towards environmental disruptions. Maybe you're aware that now in Cuba, there is no electricity. They are going through very difficult times. Okay, so this is the elevation of the building. Again, showing how this shapes architecture. And this is not just the facade, but again, the idea of not working with, sheets, but working with filters, right? In the literal way, but also in the allegorical way, right? Facades as filters of different conditions, as buffer zones between outdoors and indoors. And some engineering, devices, proving that this can be done, and they designed some of them, they assessed the cost, and they finally built an image. Again, this narrative, the capacity to communicate, to deliver knowledge in a very easy way to understand. Okay, so these are the 3 proposals, and finally a few words about how this is going to continue, or what is our outreach. First, and more obvious, the work with communities, right? We are giving back to the communities what we have learned along the process, and they may use this as a kind of tool in order to build community, to strengthen ties across or among them, and also to have some technical proposals to you know, not contest necessarily, but to work alongside the authorities. Because sometimes authorities, it's not like they don't have the will or they don't have the capacity, they don't have the time sometimes, right? So it's very good for authorities to have some informed, engaged communities that are proactive. They are not just receiving proposals and accepting or rejecting them, they are also an active part of the process, right? And we somehow like to think that we are helping in that direction. Exhibitions, this is also something that we are promoting as an outcome of this 2 years long process. We came up with an exhibition, we produced this exhibition that at the moment is traveling upstream and downstream the river, visiting different civic centers and local communities. They are able to go there to know what we are doing. We are organizing talks and explaining what we are doing. Of course, there are scientific papers on this kind of stuff that based on what we are producing. But to me, if I'm honest, this is much more interesting, and this is the kind of mission that we think we should have at universities, to be a useful and active part of society. As I said, we are also producing this magazine. We are working on the 3 coming numbers that will be published, and they are accessible at UPC Commons, which is the repository of UPC, and you can download it for free, of course. It's in PDF format in 3 languages, Catalan, Castilian, and English. I guess that you will go for English. But still, if you want to have a local touch, you will have it in Catalan or in Castilian. Okay, and as I said, we are working right now in 3 new coming issues, which is the result of a cooperation that we are having. We aim to widen our experience and to share it with other partners, European-wide, and we applied to this European project. We applied 2 years ago, I think, and we were granted 1 year ago, or yes, 1 year ago, and we started the cooperation with different partners. Politechniki Krakowska, Professor Jurkovic here, Damian, Elisa, I don't forget anyone else, some doctoral students, us, but also artist collective, Mito, and architect bottom-up association, Studio Bazaar in Bucharest, NGOs in Bucharest as well, and the Institute of Architecture here in Krakow as well, right? So we are a partnership of 6 institutions or 6 collectives that we are working together with the local communities, right? And we are at work, we are in our first half year, and we still have 1.5 years ahead in order to see how these things are also applicable or not, or shared with other contexts, other communities, and other cities, right? And as I said, we are at work now at finishing 3 new issues of the Green Gazette that will be published very soon and distributed through our website. Okay, I think that's all. I did it in time, 1.5 hours, more or less. So if there are questions, comments, suggestions, I would be more than happy to answer them. Thank you.